Good morning, everybody. Welcome to, season 2, episode 1 of the Sultans of Security podcast. I'm sorry it's been a while for us, again, scheduling conflicts, but today we are here with our first guest on the podcast. So we want to welcome in Henry Marchesani. Henry, originally from the Philly area, he's married. He's been a sworn officer for over 25 years, 22 of which is with the current agency that he's with. He's had numerous schooling, some of which is was a graduate of the Johns Hopkins Police Executive Leadership Program and also the FBI National Academy. Currently, he serves as the detective sergeant in an investigative unit for the agency he's working for. So, everybody, please welcome Henry Marchesani.
Thank you.
Welcome. Thanks for having. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
So, but we were talking off air before we got online. But the impetus of this podcast is just getting together with people that we know in the policing field, security field, talking about many of the challenges that are facing law enforcement and security, improvements, trends, all of those kind of things. So if you want to dive in, give us a little bit more of your background, and how you decided to go into policing, what prompted you to go in there, and what's maybe has kind of kept you in doing this line of work, considering the negative, a lot of the negative press that's been over the last decade over policing and those kind of things.
Come from a family full law enforcement. Grandfather, great grandfather, cousin, uncle, all outside the Philly area. I moved down here in '98 and actually left my current agency and actually came back to it about a year and a half later. Was actually working for the agency where my great grandfather was a chief in the 40s and 50s, so a very long time ago. So a little different policing back then as compared to today, but I would assume here. I've been in where I'm at now, like you said, for about 22 years total, 22 and a half. I've gone through just about every division within the agency: patrol, uniform. I was in the administrative end for a short while, and now I'm in a plainclothes detective unit, which I absolutely love. Never even entertained the idea of being a detective because of the way the agency was structured years ago. It allowed a little more flexibility with what you were doing with your 8-hour shift, so to speak, your day-to-day activities or your caseload or your calls for service. And I was asked in, I think it was 2015, to entertain a position within our detective division, actually taking it, being in charge of it. And I jumped at it. I'm on the downside of my career. I never experienced something like that, so took it and ran. Been there since 2016, and I love it. I love the change, the challenge, something different, learning something different. And you talk about negativity. It does affect you to a point. I try to block it out because there is put it simply, there is a victim that needs your services, so to speak. There is someone that's looking for some sort of closure, whatever you're working. It could be, a petty theft, or like we did offline, Sean, talk about how we've been busy in December with a couple homicides. So it's been very interesting the last 22 years, I could say. It's almost like they say it's like the wildest show on earth. It's almost like it's a circus. I mean, there's a variety of different people you're helping, and honestly, people you're putting in jail. So it's been a lot of fun. I've had a lot of fun, a lot of experiences. Been given a lot of opportunities in those 22 years. So,
and knowing where you work too, one would not think that all of those different experiences probably would have ever happened there in your time there. But as that area has grown, it's brought in different elements, different other, I guess, challenges too. Even though some people still have one idea of what that area is like versus what actually is happening there. So it's even my time there, being around there, just shopping, traveling around there, just seeing the changes and I have some family living up still near that area, so kind of hear from them too how things are changed as well.
Yeah, they like to keep it a small town, which you still get that vibe. It's, I guess, the way the crime has changed. I mean, seeing it on my end. So, Shane, I don't know your experience and your career, let alone Sean. I don't know your full career, but I was always a proactive kind of guy, and I'm more of like a reactive. Like, hey, Henry, we had this happen last week, or we had this happen 2 hours ago. I always find that was a real challenge for me. And now they're more sophisticated. COVID didn't help with the ability to wear a mask wherever you go.
Right.
Technology has changed, so I've learned that we're going to have you on a camera somewhere. We may not know your name, but we'll have your face. And being very optimistic about what you're trying to accomplish, because there's an end goal. Like I said, there's always someone that's looking for the police to do something and have some sort of closure. And you're not going to get a closure on everything. I'm not going to fool or lie to you. It's just you have that driving you to get to that next stage in whatever you're doing. So
Sure.
kind of keeps you
Even if
pushing along.
even if the case is solved and there's an eventual conviction, that still doesn't provide closure for every single person involved. So, but you do as much as you can, and
Exactly.
with all the resources that you have and all the investigative leads, and that's all we can ask for. Anyone could ask for.
Exactly.
So
I guess question, since you have somebody still on, I mean, semi closely retired. It hasn't been that long since you retired. But what is, for the two of you, what is one thing? And I think Shannon and I have talked about it before. But what is one thing you would like to see changed as something taught at the academy that would benefit new officers hitting the street right now, based upon what you've seen over the years?
Henry, if you want to go first, that's fine with me. Or if you want.
Good question. It was 1994 was my first full academy. So my comparative compliance was in 98. And Shane's probably familiar with comparative compliance. It's just a brief overview of what Maryland law, both juvenile and adult law, and then the policies and procedures and the paperwork kind of surrounding all that over 4 weeks, 5 weeks. So a very limited exposure to Maryland's procedures. So I was certified in Pennsylvania, 6 months, put myself through, and what I'm seeing, I mean, and there's a lot of, you could go off on a tangent with a lot of issues with the academy. Not that, I'm sorry, wrong way to describe it. Not issues, but what people are being exposed to, what cadets are being exposed to, what recruits are being exposed to. And I'm on the investigative end of it. So you can't really teach them how to investigate a crime while they're in the academy. And they have a very limited exposure to exactly what those things are. And these academies are trying to package they're trying to package a cadet in this limited amount of time it might be Baltimore County, it might be Baltimore City, it might be, Pennsylvania State Police or whoever it may be. And I hate to say it, but maybe polishing them more on the investigative end of it, but you're never going to get that. There's not enough time in that 6 or 7 months. State mandates so many hours, and there's so much leeway these agencies have in getting recruits trained up. And you lean on your FTOs. I mean, that's another thing. You're leaning on your FTOs and your actual your agency's trainers to get them spun up, so to speak. And I guess being prepared, being more prepared. But that's kind of where I see it. They're coming out. I mean, great training, great equipment, great instructors, physically fit, and most of them. You would think, because I just recall you go back to 1994 now, and there was a lot of PT. I mean, you were in there 2 or 3 days a week. There was calisthenics, there was running, there was team drills, whatever it may be. And the book work. I mean, that's a big thing too. The book work. You need to. Granted, you could always open up the article to look up what law they just violated, but you need to know the basics. And I mean, there's a lot of book work involved, and being prepared that way.
Yeah, just it's funny. It's about like length of period or the length of time in an academy setting, and at least for Baltimore County, my understanding is that they're lengthening that by another 2 months, with an additional month of field training. So now it's close to 10 months of time in the training atmosphere, either in the academy setting or out on the road with your FTO. And I think that's a step in the right direction. So that's one thing I would have liked to seen that actually is taking place now. I can just remember, coming out of the academy, and it was like, if you knew your specified misdemeanors and you knew how to write a traffic ticket, that was good enough for the time being. And there was always that, well, whatever you learn in the academy, forget about that. This is how we really do things kind of atmosphere sometimes, to where you get to see how the practical application of things changes from what you learn in the on the books. But yeah, I mean, length of time I think is the biggest thing. I'm not sure where your agency, but the mandatory taser training, it seemed to be, when I was on, it was optional. But now the recruits coming out that is a requirement. You are going to have a taser. You are going to carry a taser. It's not a choice of yours. So that's another thing. Yeah, but that's all I got to say about that.
Yeah, and I agree. I agree. It's you would think the public would say, you guys can't get trained in 10 months. Well, I mean, there is a lot going on. There is a lot to learn. And you
Yes.
mentioned, and I grew up with that same mindset was, forget what you learned in the academy. You're going to learn the real stuff now. And to an extent, it is kind of true. It is the specified misdemeanors. If you know what they are, and you can arrest for any felony, talking about the barking dog or talking about the little juvenile that just stole a pack of chewing gum, those things can be worked out with your mouth. And if you could talk real well and learn how to communicate, and de-escalation is kind of the hot topic. If you learn how to de-escalate stuff and kind of almost like a negotiator, so to speak, you're going to be fine. You're going to be successful. You can learn the other tech. You can learn writing search warrants and how to clear a building, and first aid can be trained. You can learn this stuff. Again, you're getting the basics in the academy, but for the most part, you are kind of tossing it all out the window, and the real stuff happens. The real stuff. If you're in a busy precinct, and you're learning, and you got a real, I guess aggressive might not be the right word, but a real proactive FTO who's showing you a lot of different things, which I kind of was exposed to. I was exposed to early on, and then I kind of gravitate to some of the guys, some of the work that you're interested in. So,
Yeah. And that was the thing with the field training. There was a set amount of things that we had to either. I was an FTO also, so we had a packet. All right, you must go through these 30 different things or whatever it was, and sign off that, okay, you transported a prisoner. Okay, you wrote a traffic ticket. All right, you investigated a burglary. So you're trying to teach all that and do all these things and juggle that time management. At the same time, you want to make sure that they're not doing something that gets themselves hurt, or
right.
driving the correct way, and that sort of thing. And of course, that was the big threshold of, okay, now you're going to drive, and it's like, all right, let me make sure I wear my seatbelt this time.
Sure.
So.
Sure. Yeah,
Well,
I was an FTO as well, so I can. There's been a few very successful guys in there. Some of them are still with the agency, kind of doing their thing, and it's that's an important integral part of the agency too. Your FTOs are very, very important to what outcome and what goals and what where that agency is going to progress to. As you retire and the older guys kind of move on and out, and establishing that good foundation for that officer's career. So.
Mm-hmm.
I guess a follow-up question I have is, what happens if you is the things you're talking about, Shane? What happens if you aren't able to, through the course of your shifts with this training? What if you don't get to do all of those things? All that, what if there's no those opportunities to investigate a burglary or something like that? So what happens? Do you have to continue? Do you have to lengthen the training period so that you can actually have the appropriate time to experience those with them, so you can sign off properly, or how does that work?
Well, at least for Baltimore County, you would have more than one FTO. So if someone was with me for a month, then they would have someone else for another month. So there's definitely, an opportunity, I think, within, at that point, 2 months to capture all the things that you need to. And there was usually like a week where they were with the midnight officer just to get a taste of what it was like to work, 10 to 6 or, but you would also have an opportunity if you hadn't handled something that if it came out on someone else's post, you could key up on the radio and say, hey, this is, unit, we were 1230. We'll take that case. And then you would presume it so that you had the opportunity. So it's very rare, I think, to not be able to capture all the things that were required within that booklet within that 2-month time frame. But if it came down to it, then I think if anything would lengthen the time, it would be the recruits or the officers, probationary officer performance. If they weren't meeting the expectation at that 2-month time frame, then the commanders could often say, okay, we're going to extend that field training another month. So yeah, that more than, we forgot to write that burglary. Now you're going to be here another week. Now that wasn't really a thing that ever came up. But Henry, any similar experiences like that?
100% with you. If there was we are a little quieter community, not quite as busy as the Dundalk or Essex precinct, or Towson with, thefts or White Marsh, but it depends on what you're doing when you're day to day. The only real reason I think an extension would be performance or lack thereof, or something goes wrong, or they can't drive, or might be some driver training, and we've had those, or there's a disciplinary issue. But you hope to coach and counsel that guy or that gal where you're not extending that academy, or I'm sorry, you're not extending that FTO program, and you want to be able to push those officers into doing different things, and almost put them into an uncomfortable zone where they're going to be comfortable coming off of field training. And primarily our agency would hopefully get to a point where they pair up that FTO once that recruit's off training, that they're working the same shift or same hours, and the two of them, because there's that relationship, can kind of work through issues or work through obstacles that now recruit that's come off FTO is now by himself in a car, by him or herself in a car, and it's got some sort of speed bump or something to try to get over, a question on paperwork or an arrest or something. So it's not
Right.
coming into a problem where you're terminating them in the probationary period, because it's not like it's secret here. We are in a time where we're having trouble recruiting people. In my position with backgrounds, there's times where I'll sit on interview boards and help an administrative staff out, and it's we're getting good interviews. It's just there isn't a whole lot. You're not getting the 15 or 20 in an interview board. You might get 5 or 6, and some of them don't even show. They don't even call. And it's a variety of people. It's recruits that are 21, 22, some that just have the academy training, maybe leaving an agency to go to another one, and some that have got 5 or 6 years on. They're just not showing up. And you couldn't keep me from applying for an agency in '94. I was ready to rock and roll. I mean, that's the way I looked at it. I was looking for a challenge, and I wanted to be an officer bad enough. And I mean, I don't know what it was, Shane, for you when you first applied, but it was tough back then. And
yeah, I came on in 2000, and it was a competitive process. It was like, all right, if you want to be in our agency, we now have the agency had the upper hand, so to speak, in that they had multiple or numerous applicants to choose from. And if you got selected, it was because, you had the skills, and you had the, what's a good word for it? You were just a high quality candidate that the agency wanted to just even get into the academy, let alone graduate. But now it just seems like, there's all these incentives I'm seeing where recruiting bonuses. It's when I first saw those sort of things, it reminded me of like military, retention bonuses or recruiting bonuses.
Yeah.
Something I never thought we'd see in police work, but here they are. Join and get a $10,000 bonus or whatever it is, and I think that's just an effect of recent years, not just Minneapolis, but also just COVID has caused that decline in the folks that are interested in being in law enforcement. So now the shoe's on the other foot to where I guess the recruit has all the power. One thing I saw too was when I joined, at least it seemed like if you did this, it was for, I'm going to do this as a career. I'm not, I'm going to do this for 20, 25 years, 30 years. Now it seems like folks are getting this and going, well, I did it for 6 months. I did it for a year. It's not for me. I'm going to move on to something else. And not law enforcement. Just I was a cop for a year, and now I'm going to go work at Home Depot, or I'm going to get an office job, which is kind of unheard of back in the day.
Yeah.
Which I feel I find that strange. I guess I'm so old school mentality. When I want to be at a job, I want to stay there. I want the stability of that job, going to, knowing what I'm doing every day to a degree, and not bouncing around. Like I don't like that, because to me sometimes it takes a while to get your feet under you and get established and stuff like that, and then you don't want to uproot and go somewhere else.
Sure. And you're getting a skill set that's geared toward law enforcement. So when you apply for that job at Home Depot or in a corporate setting, how do you translate your skills to be able to even get a job in something else? But I mean, it's just the kind of where we are now. But Sean, you were saying?
So if there's one thing that each of you could change, since you both had experience as FTOs, what is one big thing that you would change or add to the training program? If anything at all. I mean, based upon I mean, the years you guys were on the job and still on the job, and things that you've seen, what are some, even if they're small things, what are things that you could see that would be beneficial? I mean, obviously there are certain things that are agency specific depending upon where you're at, because those play a part in things, but like overarching things where you see that it's they're very light on it coming out of the academy, but it's important that they need to know that once they hit the street.
Yeah, I mean, gosh, I have to say that you couldn't. The reason that the academy was set up the way it was because you can't just take someone and drop them in a crisis situation and say, well, let's see what happens. You've got to add those stressors in the academy: the yelling, the exercise, the rigidity of it. But I don't know what an academy setting is like now. If it's still the same way, I can remember you coming through and you're saluting everything that moves, and you're bracing the wall when someone came by. But I couldn't tell you if that's still how things are, and if they're not, I'm not saying we have to go back to that solid military structure, but I think it definitely helped establish a more, I guess, focused paramilitary type organization that the police departments are or were back then. So if that's something that's not there anymore, I would say bring that back, with a modern twist to make it more feasible. But Henry?
Yeah, I agree. It's been probably 12 years since I FTO'd, field trained somebody, maybe 11 years, somewhere in there, with a promotion and then moving out of patrol in 2012, 2013. So 2013. I think our FTO program has evolved for the better. There's one supervisor in charge of it, and it's kind of funneled through that supervisor. I think I've touched on, like, I guess your FTO. I think it's got to be the cream of the crop in your agency. It's got to be the guys that are constantly learning. They've got some time on, maybe even holding rank, and that can be difficult with the smaller agencies because those officers holding rank are probably in charge of a squad of officers or another division of some sort. But I think your cream of the crop, because that's going to produce, I think, your cream of the crop. There's a lot of different things going on in law enforcement day to day, and the officer that kind of comes in, and we all have them, they just kind of come into work and kind of drive around for 8 hours and maybe limited in their calls for service or investigation or contributing to the goals of the agency, I should say. So I think those officers, male or female, you could put any race, sex on it you want, but your officers that are out there, go-getters that are learning this job every single day, learning something new, they're your FTOs. They're the ones that are going to help develop your future leaders, your squad leaders, your future chiefs. I think that's, but I don't know what specific would change. I think our program is very comprehensive. One little tidbit, we stay with the state mandate. So we're always set on that most people don't know. I don't know if you know Shane or Sean, but if you're a certified officer, at least with my agency, with the academy training, our field training program is 160 hours long. So it's 2 pay cycles. If you're a recruit coming out of the academy, it's 240 hours. And we kind of stick to that hour range. You can't go below it, but you can certainly go above it. Now, I don't think that's enough time sometimes. And they're coming out of an academy after 10 months, but they're also at another police department's academy. They might be in Baltimore counties or Baltimore cities, and unfortunately they're learning their policies and procedures, and their techniques might be completely different than, Perryville Police Department, Northeast Police Department, Hagerstown Police Department, Westminster Police Department, because these smaller agencies just don't have the staff or the resources to put on their own academy. So they look for the larger ones, and I think maybe that time frame should maybe be a little extended. But there are some exceptions, and Shane's seen them. You have some cops that come out that are just, there's something about them. Something, I hate to say hunch or hair on the back of your neck, just something sets them apart. They are go-getters. They just seem to have the right answers all the time. They do things the right way. They listen very well in the academy, maybe, or they're just absorbing what is going on very well. And there are out there. So that's probably my only changes, I would think. Just maybe the hours. But.
And I know my time with the auxiliary, that's when I tried to ride with officers, that's what I was looking for. I didn't want to ride with somebody that was just gonna write EROs or do nothing. So like when I try to ride up with somebody riding with you or like Ed Smith and stuff like that, and it was a learning process, because at the time too, I was looking to try to apply and become a police officer at the time, which translated well to when I actually applied at your agency for when there was an open position, but there was a whole to do about with that process. But
right.
Even some riding with Ed, who I was riding with on a regular, when I come in and on the midnight after the day shift or the evening shift and then stay into the midnight shift, even he was surprised how much information that I had absorbed. Yeah. But it's because I wanted to learn, even though there's some more gruff people in the agency, like Sergeant Murphy. Try to win that guy over. But learn from, even the little bit of time I rode with him, learned a lot from him. So it's like you said, I think it's having the benefit of those people in the agencies, help produce good officers, and continue to see that. So, I guess we've talked about this on another episode. So what trends are you seeing? And you talked about, improvement in technology, I think, but even for a smaller agency like you are you guys having the benefit of getting you guys to schooling to help with learning those new technologies and those kind of things?
Yeah, our agency and kudos to my bosses. Money's always a big problem, and not with the small agencies, but just with the big agencies as well. And sharing resources and being able to, like I said, solve a crime, so to speak. So on the detective end of it, there's a technology that the county, the Emergency Services Division had acquired, and helping combat retail theft. And retail theft, it's in the media every day. This organized group of people come into your store and just ravaging the shelves, and out the door they go. It's happening in Bel Air. It's the gypsy isn't the terminology anymore, but you have foreigners. They might not even be residents of the United States.
Transient.
Transient. We're 5 miles from 95. We're not that far from Baltimore City, Philadelphia, Washington D.C., major hubs. Especially, just people are just if they could take the store, they'd take the store. It's But back to my kudos to my bosses about the technology and being able to get resources in. There was a piece of equipment that we were able to acquire, although temporary, because it wasn't owned by my agency. Real-time live feed closed circuit television. These were supplanted in various locations in town and helped. I don't know if it curbed it, but helping investigating it and getting leads from that surveillance system, because the stores only have so much that they can offer. But yeah, it's the organized retail theft that keeps us busy. It's half a dozen times a week we're getting calls for, and I'm not talking, in 2000, Shane, when you're seeing $150 theft perfume, this is $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 worth. It might be perfume, it might be $10,000 in equipment from Home Depot, and
right.
they're not the loss prevention back then. They get bloody knuckles chasing you out that front door and taking you into custody. Nowadays, it's let them go. It's not worth. Again, I agree. It's not worth your health or your wellness, but you're seeing a lot of that, just pushing a cart out the door into a rental car that doesn't have a good license plate on it, or a stolen vehicle with stolen tags, and they're a little more sophisticated that way. In years past, we'd find showing your license plate on the car that you used to make that theft, and be easy to find you. Now it's a little more work involved, but we're getting a lot of successes from it. So
yeah, I still don't understand what all these people do with all these tools that they steal. Yeah, I mean, there's only so many people in the construction trade, so I was like, I don't understand what they do with all these
and
tools.
social media makes it easy. You have your Instagram accounts.
Oh yeah.
And they're so easy to change up and flip around and change a name. We're seeing it's just resources are a huge thing. I don't have the manpower to track down your Instagram account. Although there are people, and again, we share a lot of information. So there's a lot of information sharing amongst law enforcement that helps solve these cases, and the power of the email. I've seen that kind of develop into a lot of good work by law enforcement. So sharing photographs and sharing intelligence. So.
Yeah.
All right. I guess moving on to another topic. And it's just something I think you touched on a little bit before. I know, even though I wasn't never a sworn officer, but knowing a lot of people that were, knowing about what the process of the training in the academy is, talking to people and trying to make them understand, that a lot of information is relayed to a cadet in a short period of time. And because a lot of these people make arguments, I was like, well, maybe they need more training. I was just like, I mean, I would agree with you, they probably do need more training, but the nature of the job requires them to get out into the field as fast as they can. I mean, you're asking somebody to do, I guess, not as quite a complex job as a brain surgeon, but it is very complex from the standpoint is that you're asking somebody to have a basic knowledge of the law and applying that law to people in an appropriate fashion. So you're not infringing on people's rights. If people actually have committed a crime, to what degree they've committed those crimes. Not only that, but also to try to accurately shoot if they have to deploy their weapon, have to drive safely to not endanger other members of the public while they're engaging somebody else that's engaged in a criminal act. I mean, it's a lot to ask of anybody, so from that standpoint, what is one thing, I guess, any misconception you think that's been portrayed in the media that you would like to really see the media maybe, make a retraction and help change that narrative on an aspect of policing?
Yeah, but I think of one thing that comes to mind is that the decisions that are made in a split second seem to be heavily scrutinized by folks. And when I say in a broad sense, either the media or in litigation. They're taking months to review these decisions. They're not taking that into account that this person had to make a decision based in a split second with the knowledge that they knew. I think there's that misconception that somehow police are supermen and superwomen that can foresee every possible thing or that can anticipate every possible thing. And make in decisions that we had to make or have to make or forced to make. So I guess if the public had a better understanding of that, I think that would help a lot.
No, I agree. Agree 100%. They're again, the media wants that big headline. It brings a lot of money, but that millisecond of decision making, it's affecting careers. It's affecting lives. And I don't want to keep beating the dead horse, but I mean the media just it's like they're out to most media, some media, out to get you, and it's you do everything right, and like I said earlier, you try to block it out. You just try to move on to that next stage or that next call or that next day of work, and know that they're only there to make $1. That's all they're trying to do is bring in $1. Now, Shane's seen it. Sean, you've seen it. I mean, there's bad apples. There's bad apples in every line of work, and those are talked about, and they're the ones that give us the black eyes that we need to recover from. And not to go down another topic, but you got July last year with the new law enforcement, this accountability board, and the way they changed LEOBR, and you have people that maybe some have some law enforcement experience, but you have some with absolutely zero that are making decisions for us that, you kind of think like why you got into this line of work. And it wasn't for what happens in the future. It's I did it for a different reason. I just, the challenge and the ability to help people. But yeah, the media's just they're relentless for a headline. It just, and for that millisecond decision that, and it boils down to, and you could probably a common denominator with a lot of the cases, just someone listening, just listen and take an order. Like, what happened to the respect? The officer tells you to put your hands up, you put your hands up. Don't go reaching in your pants for that knife where you're going to wind up dead, or you could, or there's some confrontation out of it. It's people just the last 4 or 6 years, the lack of respect for law enforcement, and people feed on that, and they think it's okay, and yeah.
And I think it's been tied to the cycle of media. Some of the most interesting things I've seen recently is after some big and officer involved shootings, I've seen quite a few videos where you have people. It was one. It was a news outlet. They were interviewing somebody who's in charge of an organization that was, for police reform or whatever. And they had reached out to a law enforcement agency, and they welcomed them to both the reporter and that person in charge of that agency, that police reform group, invited him to come out and put him through stress inoculation testing, with simulation rounds, that they'd have a gun. There were a couple of different scenarios that were put through. And it was interesting watching the videos and the reaction of how quickly, or sometimes not quickly enough, that they didn't pull a gun and shoot when they were in imminent danger. When the actor is part of the scenario was coming at them with a knife or had a hidden gun. But it was really interesting when the one was the person in charge of the police reform group. He almost immediately, just about every time when the other person went to go move, pulled the gun out and fired. The reporter she was a little bit more reserved and everything, and she got, I mean, if it was real life, she would have been killed quite a few times because she didn't react in enough time. And then so hearing the debrief after that, when they talk about what they were feeling, what they were thinking in those split seconds, and starting to gain somewhat of an understanding of what police go through on a daily basis with that, and you talked about the lack of respect and everything. I've had those conversations with a lot of people. I was just like, I've always taught as a young, any interaction with the police, if they ask you for something, you comply with it. I mean, there's not something saying you can't ask nice questions. It's like, hey, what is this in regards to? Those kind of things. But you don't be a jerk about it,
Yeah.
because it's not going to get you anywhere. It's going to make your day a little bit tougher. But understanding, because it might have just been a miscommunication that started the interaction anyway, but it could be resolved. But it is. I mean, obviously it's a lot of things coupled together.
Henry, I'm just curious, as a kind of a side note, with your experience, have you ever encountered in recent times any of these auditors?
We have. Where we're at, we've had a few. One specific, and he's pretty widespread on social media. I'm not going to promote him or do anything. Again, he has. It doesn't bother me. I think if you're educated enough, know your job, know where you're at, because location's important. If you know your First Amendment, I'm talking as a police officer, you're fine. Shane walks down the road with a pink tutu on and wants to spread the gospel, and as long as he's free to come and go where he's at, I can't do anything for you because you're complaining about Shane wearing a pink tutu, talking about whatever agenda Shane has. Now, there are some, and we've seen it, the media, and this particular person is looking for that headline. He's been caught wrong sometimes, and sometimes he's been caught right. And it's, I hate to say it's kind of embarrassing, but I think, like I said, if you know your policies and procedures and the Constitution, this job goes really easy sometimes, especially in that essence where you're live feeding an interaction and there's a First Amendment violation and you've got your name on court paperwork and you're going to testify to try to defend yourself and go.
Is this the same person that tried to hem up the Harford County Sheriff's deputy last year?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. He's and like I said, he's been right and he's been wrong, and it and some of his interactions are it almost looks like a comedy stunt. I don't know what he's trying to gain other than some notoriety, maybe some extra money in his pocket through a lawsuit, but it
or hits, it's all
exactly.
about the hits and the
hits
likes
on YouTube, hits on it, whatever, Instagram, whatever it may be, and hey, all power to you. But like I said, as a law enforcement officer, if you know your job and you're confident in that, and you know that the First Amendment is that what it is, and how you have to kind of the framework you need to operate within, you'll be fine. I think you'll be fine.
Yep.
So I guess to capitalize on that, do you think that is something then probably should have a little bit more emphasis on it at the academy? Some additional training now for new officers with the proliferation in social media and these auditors and these kind of things now coming out of the academy.
To an extent. But
yeah,
like we've talked about, you have 10 months to train these people. It's not 24 hours a day now. It's some are living, but you're in class typically for 8 or 9 hours a day, and there's only so much time, and you really cannot at any point in time expose you to every single scenario you're going to experience. Now, I think the basics of the First Amendment and like I said, where you're at, if your location is secured, we've experienced with signage, trespassing signs. If that particular person is on a no trespass order, he could be subject to arrest. But you have the guy on the side of the road who comes up to you with a camera and or into a public parking lot, like we've seen, and engaging law enforcement, and that law enforcement's trying to make an arrest for an absolute no criminal violation, then maybe some more training on that. But again, it goes back to you're going to learn portions of the Constitution within the academy, confines of that academy training.
Right.
Now, you're not going to be a sidewalk lawyer. You're not going to be the judge. You're not going to be able to go deep in the weeds on what how that law is. But if you're following what the Constitution says and First Amendment rights, and you'll be okay. You'll be okay.
I think the public that you were talking about before about compliance, that the time and place to have that trial is in the courtroom, not there on the side of the road with that interaction. And I think that's where we've gotten to, for one reason or another in society, where, all right, I want to do everything right now. You explain to me fully why you're doing what you're doing, and it's just not, there's a time and a place for it. But yeah, not on the roadside.
And 9 times out of 10, those simple interactions are remedied with a citation or even a warning, and unfortunately they reach to a point where it could be a felony or a misdemeanor, making things a little more difficult.
Absolutely.
So, when in reality, it's really, some of them just aren't that big of a deal.
Right.
A seatbelt ticket and it's a knockdown, drag out fight, or
it turns into resisting and you name it. So
That's like every episode of Cops that I watch. It's the same thing. They fled because they didn't have their license, and it turned out
when in reality, if it happened in the state of Maryland, again, experience kind of dictates that and what your ultimate goal is. But a ticket, maybe your car gets towed. Worst case, or
right.
or the guy in the passenger seat drives the car home and you get a ticket, or you get
Yeah.
a warning. He or she gets a warning. Again, demeanor, respect, compliance. It goes a long way, and being able to de-escalate and talk about it. I mean, that's a hot topic, but being able to use your mouth to kind of work your way out of things. You can work your way into things too with your mouth. So again,
Yes. Yeah, or we've had the experience for someone that's showing up to your call. You're like, oh no, I don't want that person here. They're supposed to help you, but they wind up sometimes hurting you. But anyway, I digress.
Shane, you got any questions?
Just with your experience with the Johns Hopkins Executive Leadership Program or FBI National Academy, for those listening or watching may not be familiar with those, just give it a brief understanding of what that is and how it's helped you in your career.
The Johns Hopkins program, unfortunately, was terminated back in, I think it was 19. I think it ran for about 25 years. So what that program was, it was a bachelor's to master's degree program through their public safety leadership program in Columbia, Maryland. It was a cohort. Meaning it was the same group of people that met every Friday and Saturday for 8 hours during a normal school semester. So your spring and fall semester. And within those days, you had one class on Friday, and then your second class was on Saturday. And those two classes went for about 5 or 6 weeks. And then in the middle of the semester, another set of classes picked up. So within that semester, you had 4 classes you took with the hopes of getting your bachelor's degree. And it was primarily geared to public safety. So you had chiefs of police, you had lieutenants with larger agencies, you had commanders from your own agency, Shane, there. You had the uniformed officer. You had people from the federal side in the master's program. A short stint for a student was out of the mayor's office at the time, Baltimore City. So you had a wealth of experience, firefighters, paramedics from all over the state. And that led to a bachelor's degree, and then that stepped into the master's program in the same format, Fridays and Saturdays. Every other week. It wasn't every Friday, Saturday. It's a lot of schoolwork. But no, it was every other Friday, Saturday. And the National Academy was a 2012 process that the former chief had put together. There was an interview panel. There was a paper you had to write. I was selected. There was a background investigation by the FBI. I was assigned an investigator out of the Baltimore field office. I was kind of coached on. He's retired now. The prior training agent back then. I don't know if I should name names, but a fantastic coach. he was their training agent and making sure, one, academically, I would have been okay. I felt confident in the academics, but I wasn't in real good shape. But he stressed the importance of, you want to represent your agency correctly. You don't want to be kicked out of this program. You want to be physically fit, mentally fit. And 20, 25 pounds later, I lost. I entered the National Academy in April 13 with about 200 plus other students from all over the world in Quantico, where I stayed there for 10 weeks, Monday through Friday. I could come and go on weekends, but primarily you were there in class from Monday through Friday. And I graduated in June of 13 from there with those same group of people from all over the world, international police department, all over the world, as well as the state. So I was, you were put into a dorm-like setting, which is in Quantico, and you're in school with other people I saw probably with top secret squirrely missions. They were there for training. They were in their camo gear. They were in units that they weren't approachable, by the way, looking at them. And you've seen those people. And then you were there with recruits and agents and intel analysts that were, 21, 22 years of age, getting right out of college, and they're getting their first government job. So you were in this facility, and the way the former chief had described it, you're like a little mouse. You did not have to leave. Everything was under one roof. And from the pool to the gym to the cafeteria to the classrooms, everything was under one roof. You didn't need to leave. And everything was paid for by the FBI, minus your salary for being there. So the agency paid for my salary while I was there. So you're in a dorm-like setting. You have a roommate, and there's like a Jack and Jill sort of shared bathroom with another pair. And if I remember right, the one officer was from overseas. The other officer was from Chicago area. My roommate was a sheriff out in the northwest area of the United States, and all great people, and from all over the world. So you're getting experiences like that. Training, minus going to motor school, was probably the most grueling and most stressful, but yet invigorating, and I guess feeling like you're going to be able to make a contribution to something. You get that experience. A lot of PT. They stressed a lot of physical work, and there was a lot of downtime, a lot of networking, that kind of thing. So classes were put on through University of Virginia. So you had credits from University of Virginia, and based on where you were with your academics, you were either geared to bachelor's classes or master's classes. And at that time, I just was working on my associates. So I was more geared to the bachelor's program with University of Virginia. So I came out of there with 17 credits, took some investigative classes, forensic sciences classes. So a lot of PT, a lot of running, a lot of working out, a lot of work in that pool. So it was amazing experience. It's the only word to describe it. Absolutely amazing.
Right.
Absolutely amazing. So.
Interesting. Yeah, for our agency, the minimum rank someone had to be was lieutenant. So that was just how Baltimore County, I guess, that was their initial selection phase. Was all right. If you're a lieutenant and above, you can apply for this. So it's one of those things that I think a lot of folks, at least in Baltimore County, didn't have an opportunity to try because of that restriction, I guess you could say, myself included. So I was just kind of curious, we talked to folks that went to it about their experience with it, and it seemed like it was a well-to-do program and highly sought after. And I was just curious about your experience with it. So
I think the way they geared, at least from looking back, it was more geared, again, on rank. I was a sergeant at the time, and I think it was more geared to what you were doing. Excuse me. I guess your responsibilities. So I'm not quite sure what the responsibilities for a sergeant at Baltimore County would be, but at that time I was in charge of training, in charge of communications. I was inside administration. The chief kind of opened it up to sergeants and above. and my immediate boss wasn't interested in it at all. But there was 3 other sergeants involved, and again, a written paper based on some questions the chief provided, and an interview board, which consisted of National Academy graduates from over the state. There were some from Cecil County. I think even from your agency, Shane, there might have been one on the board, if I remember correctly. Local interviewees. So yeah, it was phenomenal experience. I mean,
Nice.
I never heard of it until I got the sergeant, and we had a former deputy chief. Unfortunately, he passed away of cancer, but he had gone through in 2000. And I think in that big break, the former chief, and unfortunately he passed of cancer as well. He was looking for another academy graduate, and I guess that would open up a seat for us, because at the time, and they still do, we share seats within the National Academy with another state. So Delaware, so it's the Maryland Delaware chapter, and at the time they were picking 2 applicants from each state. So at the time it was a lieutenant out of Westminster PD, a small agency like the one I work for, and then there was a Newcastle County lieutenant. I think he was the personnel director. And Newcastle County is a very large police department. And then Delaware State Police. He was a commander out of their CID. I think he was a lieutenant at the time. And but yes, yeah, phenomenal experience. It's
Cool.
If I could do it again, I would, but I'd never get the opportunity. But
Yeah. And I think the importance of it is it sheds a light on the fact that there's continuing education beyond the academy and beyond just your agency that is afforded to law enforcement to, kind of get that word spread out that, law enforcement is a profession. It's not just a job. It's got a lot of prerequisites, and it's got a lot of things that you need to accomplish to get into it, to get through the academy, and also maintain as you maintain your career for 20 years or so years. So yeah, it's important that you can bring that to light.
I personally felt real out of place for a couple of reasons. One, I was so young, and I'm not comparing it because everybody else was older than me. It's just young. I mean, what I mean by young is your time on the job.
Right.
And like I said, my roommate was a sheriff. He had retired once and was sheriff of this very large sheriff's department out west. 30 years on the job, and I had maybe 11 at the time. And also on top of all that rank, I was comparing, I had deputy chiefs, sheriffs of large agencies, people with large large groups of people under them from federal agencies. So it was quite daunting, but fit right in. I mean, they treated you like, the next door neighbor. It was remarkable. So.
Yeah, for the longest time, I just thought it was part of the sergeant's process that when you became a sergeant where you're at, that just was going to be expected that sometime shortly after that, you're going to be headed to one of those academies, because it seemed like that while I was there.
Yeah, and again, it's like I said, it kind of you're if you really, really want to go, you're kind of, and at least in my chapter, you're dealing with another state. So, and we're rather small. I mean, Delaware and Maryland is probably smaller than Pennsylvania and some other states. So you have that competition, and everybody wants to go. If you're a supervisor and you're turning your nose to that training, all I can say is shame on you. I mean, you'll never get that experience again. You'll never get that experience again. So I was very fortunate. Like I said, still do. We got some great bosses that they're not, I guess the wrong would be looking out for you, but they're really there to kind of move that agency forward, whether it's training or experience or doing something different, whatever it may be. But I was afforded a lot of opportunities and took advantage of it. I mean, it did my best, at least my abilities, to score well, write well, and gain experience, and whatever that may be, and being optimistic about it. So.
Awesome.
Yeah. Sean,
anything else, Shane?
No, that was just it was the curious, just to, again, share that information out. And thank you for sharing that. And
Get your degree before you start police work.
yes,
That every Friday and Saturday, every other Friday, Saturday was a lot of time management. And again, I had a lot of help from my bosses in, taking time off to do that. But you got people listening that trying to juggle a degree of schooling and full-time work and lives outside of police work. That I would encourage if you can.
Yeah. Do it and do it when the kids are young or before you have kids, and because life happens and you find yourself all these other responsibilities that get in. You're trying to juggle, so
and it might be a recruitment
promote
tool.
early if you can.
Some agencies actually offer that AA degree when you graduate, or at least I've known some in the state agency to not necessarily graduate with an A, but they give you the time off to then finish that AA while you're still working for them. So that's a recruitment tool too. I mean, that's something that you need to do if that's what you want to do, if that's what you want to accomplish. And
yeah, but no, Sean, anything else? Or I think we've covered a lot of ground. Both academically and real world situations, and kind of the theory and the practice, and learn a bit more. It's nice having your first guest, Henry. So I
appreciate that, Sean. I appreciate you reaching out and the time. And you guys
we appreciate having you.
Yeah, if you guys ever need anything up here, you know where I'm at. I'm an email away or a phone call away. Shane, you're probably a little closer, but
yeah. But next time I'm back in Maryland, I have to swing by and try to visit everybody. I just never have enough time when I'm there to try to fit a lot in. We were there this past summer for Shane's oldest son graduating high school and going to college, so had to be there as a godparent. So
congrats.
It was a great time. We drove through the area because we went over. I said my brother-in-law and sister-in-law live up there. They're right off of 24. They live over there, so it was good. It's always good to be in the area. So, but thank you for the time. It was great talking to you. I'm glad you guys are doing well. Appreciate everything. So we'll be in touch again, I'm sure. I said, thank you for the time.
Not a problem.
All right. We'll talk to you soon.
Yep. Talk to you soon. Take
care.